match the job opportunity that you're applying for. So, in the past, when we created resumes, and perhaps even today, um, we would use the same resume to apply to multiple job opportunities. We cannot do that anymore. It is important for you to understand this, and the reason why this is happening is that your resume, when you send it to an individual, such as perhaps a small company or to a large corporation, that resume is going to be scanned by a software tool to extract the information that you have in your document and compare it against what the employer is asking for in their job description. Now, the job description is a part of the job opportunity that you find typically on the internet, or perhaps you may have been given by someone as a hard copy document, or you may have heard about the position. The job description is what the employer is asking you for, that you should have these capabilities, you should have these skills, these accomplishments, etc., 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 perhaps your education, previous experience. So when you create your resume, you must create it in such a way that the content of your resume document matches as close as possible to what the employer is asking for, so you can get to the interview. And this is very important now, especially when the employer is using a software tool to extract your resume content and do a comparison to decide if your resume is going to be passed forward for further review. So this is the scenario. You create a resume, you submit it through the internet, it's an electronic copy, or you submit it through an email. It is received by an employer or a recruiter, whoever you're sending the resume to, and that individual will have installed on their computer system a software tool which is called applicant tracking system, that will scan your electronic resume, and it will then create an image of your resume, and it will compare it to what that employer or person is asking for. In other words, the information that they need to invite you to the interview. If your resume does not match what the employer is asking for, if the content of your resume does not match what the employer is asking for as far as your skills, abilities, and things like that, then your resume will be rejected. Okay? So it will be discarded. It will not be viewed or reviewed by a human. And so this now becomes very important for you to understand, is that if you send a generic resume or a master resume to every job opportunity and it does not meet the requirements of what the employer is asking for, and you find that in the job description section, then your resume is going to be rejected. However, here is what will typically happen. When the employer or whoever receives your resume, and if they're going to use a software tool to review your document, that software tool, before it actually does give me 1 second, I just have to admit these people into the workshop. That software tool, before it does a comparison, is going to automatically send you a response that said, thank you very much for your resume. It is presently being reviewed. We will be in touch with you as soon as possible. So that is done first, okay? However, if your resume is rejected, there is no email that is sent to you, or a communication that identifies that the resume was rejected. So you get an email that identifies that your resume was received, but you get no email that identifies that the resume was rejected. And so you keep waiting for a potential interview or further communication. Nothing ever happens because your resume never matched the job opportunity. Okay? So when we are applying to jobs today, it requires us to take our master resume that we have, our main resume that we created, may be very beautiful, may be very incredible, but we have to massage it and edit it to match whatever the employer is asking for before we send it. All right? So the resume is a sales and marketing tool that gets you to the job interview. And the reason why the employers want it is that they want to know if you are a potential candidate to be hired or potential candidate to be interviewed. Okay, so in general, when we talk about the purpose of the resume, it consists of your skills, your abilities, your achievements, your experiences, your accomplishments, your education, and a lot of information that sells you as a potential character or potential good character or someone that has strong value for that employment opportunity. Okay, so why am I actually mentioning this now before we get into the body of the presentation? Because it means that for every job opportunity that you apply to, you have to create a unique resume. Now, it doesn't mean that you create a brand new resume. It means that you take your original resume, which is what we call the master resume. We create a version of that, we make the adjustments, and we send it to that job opportunity. So you'll be spending a lot more time creating a resume for every job opportunity, which means that there is a lot of work involved when we're now seeking new employment opportunities because there is the need for your document to match what the employer is asking for. All right, so let's get into this presentation and talk about the rest of the information. Okay, so let's talk about the actual tips. So I'm just going to scroll through here, get them up so we can see the first six. So we talked about number one, know the type of job you want, write the resume for that job, not the job you had. So we understand what number one is about, okay? Number two, avoid the words I, me, or mine, the resume. In other words, we are not creating this professional document in the first person. So if we are structuring our resume, we have a section at the top, which is typically called the summary statement. Some people may know that as the objective statement. We do not start that paragraph by saying, I am seeking a position. We do not include me or my in any information in the actual resume. All right? So just understand that you will not create the document using first person tense. Now, number three, you're telling a story, but remember it's not a book. The resume is typically structured on a 1 or 2 or 3 page maximum document. Typically, most resumes are sitting on a 2 page. So it's a story about you, about your abilities, your skills, your accomplishments, your history, but we're not writing a large novel. So the intent of creating this resume is not to talk so much about yourself that you write many pages. It is a document that is created to reflect why you're the best candidate for this job opportunity and why they should invite you to the interview. All right. So you'll be organizing your resume so it's easy to read, meaning that you'll be following a certain structure. And that structure is what we call the resume template or the resume format. And the resume format that we'll be using from going forward is the combination resume format, and we'll be talking about that in a minute. Now, number five, do not include personal information. What this means is do not include your physical street address in your contact section of the resume. The contact section is what starts the resume. It's at the top. It includes your first name and your last name, followed by your followed by your city, state, and zip code, followed by your telephone number, followed by your email, and then followed by a URL, which is a LinkedIn URL. LinkedIn is a professional social media platform to help you find employment opportunities as well as market and sell yourself to basically take advantage of what we call the hidden job market. So in that contact section of your resume, where you'd identify your city, state, and zip, you do not put your physical street address or your apartment number. We don't want to do that mainly for two reasons. One is for security, especially if you're female and you're concerned about yourself or your family perhaps you have a lot of children. Your resume is distributed everywhere when you send it out. You don't know who actually picks it up. You don't know who views your resume. And so if you're giving them all the information already, which is your name, your email address, your telephone number, and now you're including where you physically live, that you're broadcasting that to the general public. So for that reason, we don't want to include your physical street address for security reasons. The other reason is that when you include your physical street address and your contact information, if I'm an employer and I receive your resume, I'm going to, because of my curiosity, I'm going to Google where you live. I'm going to drop that address in to the Google search, and I'll see your actual location of your neighborhood and a picture of your home. And why do I do that? Well, we're all curious. That's just part of what people normally do. But that's also what employers do. They're trying to find out as much information about you before they invite you to the interview. So if you give them that opportunity and the picture of your home is in a less than desirable neighborhood, and this employer happens to be a person who discriminates, they may choose not to hire you or bring you to the interview because they don't like where you live. Perhaps that neighborhood may have some issues. Perhaps that employer may not want to hire individuals because they discriminate who predominantly live perhaps in that neighborhood. There are two sides to the coin though, okay? We could be talking about an address that is in a neighborhood that may not be desirable. And that doesn't mean that you are an individual that doesn't have the capabilities and the credentials and the professionalism to be the best candidate that the employer could ever have hired. We know that many people live in neighborhoods or areas that may not be up to standards of what other people want, but that doesn't change the fact that these people are high professionals, okay? It just happens to be the state of the economy or whatever you're going through. But we have to be cautious about people that discriminate. Now, the other side of the coin is, let us suggest that you as an individual send your resume in with your physical street address to a position such as a minimum wage job in a warehouse, and you're staying with your family member or your friends who live in a multi-million-dollar neighborhood. So when this employer Googles your address and they see that you're living in a very wealthy neighborhood, they may choose not to bring you in for the interview or hire you because you're coming in for a minimum wage job, and they feel that there are other more individuals who desperately need a job, and so they may opt you out because they might think that you're obviously very wealthy. Okay, so for that reason, we do not want to include the physical street address or the apartment number in the resume addressed contact section. All right, remember, CD, state, and zip only. Obviously, when we are creating a resume, we're trying to match the job description. So whatever we read in the job description that we need to bring to our resume is what we call keywords. And the keywords is the information that you read in the job description that would identify specific skills, abilities, requirements, experience, education that the employer is looking for. You're trying to bring that in to your resume so that when you create the section, which is called the summary statement, you're going to allow them to read that section that shows a match of what they're asking for versus what you have to offer. Okay, so we basically use keywords when we're creating the resume to structure that resume. All right, now let's move forward and talk about the next slide. So because we are creating a resume on a 1 or 2 page document, typically we want to make sure that we are utilizing all the available space to write the information that is pertinent to the job description. So when we're creating our resume, our document, we have to be careful about how many words we use or how long the sentences are, because we can end up running into like a 3 or 4 page document. Okay, so everything that we write must be important and must be related to the job description. Now you're going to try and keep the resume to 1 or 2 pages, 3 pages maximum. If you're going to print the document, you must print on one side of the page. So we're not printing on front and back. So if you have a 2 page resume, it's 2 physical pages that you'll be printing on. Now, try not to be dishonest in your resume. Not that you are intentionally being dishonest, but what may happen is when we are creating the resume, we may use certain words to describe ourselves in the skills section or perhaps in the summary statement. And we might use a word such as proficient or experienced. And we might then use the word proficient or experienced when we make reference to technology or software application, such as Microsoft Office. That's quite common in many resumes, that people want to identify to the employer that they're very, very good and knowledgeable in a certain software tool. Now, Microsoft Office happens to be one of the most desirable software tools out there. But when we say Microsoft Office, that is actually a suite of 5 applications. It's Microsoft Word, it's Microsoft Excel, it's Microsoft PowerPoint, Microsoft Outlook, and Microsoft Access. So if you want to use the word proficient, just be careful, because the employer is going to look at that and believe that you're absolutely highly knowledgeable of that tool set. And so when you go to the interview, they may start asking you questions about your knowledge on that tool. So be careful about using that word proficient or experienced when we talk about certain types of software tools. Otherwise, they will eventually find out. Even if you're hired, within the first couple weeks, you'll be expected to be very, very proficient in that tool. And of course, if you can't deliver, then you'll be, asked to leave. So that is the issue of dishonesty. It's a very subtle mistake, but it is still considered being dishonest. Now, another area that we typically make a mistake on is in our employment history area, where we identify the start date and the end date. That is incorrect. So the start date and the end date is a month followed by a year. If we're not sure when we started a job or when we ended a job because it's so far back as far as the month is concerned, then sometimes we put a month in, either to because we think it's the best guess, or to stretch the time that we were at the job to make it seem that we're at the job much longer. But when you are interviewed and they actually ask you for employment verification, you're going to have to pull your W-2s or some other proof to identify that you're actually at these different job opportunities or job locations. And then they will see that there's a difference in when you're physically at the job versus what's on your resume. And that could actually have you discharged from the job as well. So just be really careful when we create the resume to be as correct and as to be absolutely sure as possible. Now let's see, we have a chat coming up. Okay, hi Daniel. Yes. Any questions, Daniel? Okay, no. All right, so I'll just continue. Okay, good. Okay, here we go. Another chat. Oh, no problem. No, not an issue, Daniel. You'll still get credit. No issues, okay? All right, good. Okay, so let's continue. So typically when we're creating the resume, we will proofread, because what's so important is this is a reflection of your professionalism and your ability to do good documentation. There should be no grammar or structural issues in the document. We have so many tools available to us to double check everything, and then we also have other people that can assist us. Okay, so let's move forward and talk about the actual structure of the resume and get into this presentation. All right, so we're going to talk about the contact information. That is actually what is included in the first page of the resume at the top of the document. So as I mentioned before, it consists of your name, and then underneath your name, which is your first name and your last name, Underneath that is your city, state, and zip. So your city, state, and zip is on one line. Okay? Remember, we're not including our physical home address or street address or apartment number. Followed by that is the telephone number, and followed by that is your professional email. Now, I'd like to mention something.
I have a question, Mr. Michael.
Yes, yes, go
So
ahead, go
I
ahead.
already have put my stuff online. So with my address and stuff like that. So if I take it down, it still will be up there, like on Indeed and stuff.
Yes, Ebony, you just have to go into Indeed and just adjust your profile information, and that's not going to impact you at all. Yeah,
Okay.
yeah, and that won't affect any previous applications that you may have done. Okay, all right. Okay, let's see, any other questions? Okay, okay, so we have a question from, give me one sec here. I'm just, Ebony, you may want to turn off your video
It's
if
on.
possible.
Oh, I didn't know it was on. Sorry.
Yeah, no problem. Okay, great. Okay, so the question from Lisa is, I feel like some potential employers will pass over resumes if you are unemployed. How do you feel about listing the most recent job as a current on a resume, but listing the terminated date in the application? So here's the thing, Lisa, that's quite common, and you have a good reason to believe that. Most employers typically are looking for candidates, but regardless of how, if you're employed or under or unemployed, it's how you sell yourself in the document. Okay, so while it's quite true that many employers, give me one sec here, I just want to um, turn off the microphone for somebody here. Okay, cool. All right. Why it's also important to understand that employers typically want to hire or steal people who are presently employed. Just because you're unemployed doesn't necessarily mean you're not going to be um, invited to the interview. Okay, it just depends on who they're trying to find and how quickly they're trying to fill that position. But what you must not do is have any kind of um, um, misinformation on your resume versus your application, because it will eventually be compared. So if you are presently unemployed and you identify in your last job that it says current, it means that you're still currently working. And as a result of that, let's say that you are invited to the interview based on the resume and you're not given the opportunity to fill out an application form. And you do so well on this interview that they now ask you for your references. And potentially they will then contact your existing employer, or they'll ask you, how much notice do you need to give them? um, then you're setting yourself up for being dishonest, because at the interview, you don't want to correct them that you're no longer at that location, because on the resume you said that you're still currently employed. So that sets up a situation for an ethical issue and a concern of dishonesty. So chances are, if you had if you were in that situation, you got to the interview and then you had to disclose you're no longer working, and they asked you for your termination date and it was before you sent that resume, then you will not be employed, because that's an issue of ethics and dishonesty. So just be careful about that. Many people use that. I've seen, I was a career coach with this company for a long time until I recently took over this position. So I was a career coach at Career Source Broad, or formerly Workforce One, for about 15 years. So I've seen many, many resumes, and I've worked with a lot of clients. And many clients actually used to do that, and they did get hired because it was not caught. Okay, but if it is caught and it's a really good position that requires integrity and ethical behavior, then you're going to be dismissed. So just be careful about that. All right, so the email that we have, so my suggestion to everyone, and I can get into a discussion on that, but I don't want to use this time here to identify why it's so important. You should not use your private email address to solicit employment opportunities with your resume and things like that. You should create a unique professional email address that is different from your private email address, and that professional email address is specifically used for your career transition, for your job searching. And the reason is, the first reason obvious, is that when you're using your private email address to solicit employment opportunities, you're already receiving a lot of garbage in your inbox, in your spam folder, and you may be forever deleting a lot of information. And also, you're receiving a lot of information in your inbox that is coming from your family member or friends, and you might be having iMessaging and things like that. Okay, when you are actually engaged in looking for a job and you're seriously um, concentrating on finding a job, this is not a 2 hour engagement per day. This is more like a 10 or 8, 10, 12, 14, 16 hour per day engagement. And if you can't do that because you have other obligations, then you're going to do the best you can. But it means that you have to work from an environment where you feel comfortable that any kind of solicitation coming into your inbox or into the spam folder is only related to employment opportunities. The only way that you can do that is to create a unique and new professional email address so that um, you will not receive any information from anywhere else but the people that you're applying to or the institutions that you're applying to. So I suggest, to make your life a lot easier and to really create a very thorough and organizing workflow so you can completely concentrate in this environment that you're working from, is to create a unique email address that is specifically tailored for job search. No, when it says professional email, it means that it must be structured by your first name followed by your last name at an email service provider. If you already have that structured in your private email address, great. That was a good choice. But you're still not going to use your private email address. You're going to create another email address specifically for your job searching. So it must be your first name followed by your last name and an email service provider. Now, if that first name and last name is already taken, either by you or someone else, then it can be your first name followed by your last name using 2 digits, like 2 numbers, or 4 numbers. Just be careful that when you use 4 numbers, you don't identify the year you're born. Most people do that. So I was born in 1957. So one of my email addresses that I would not use for professional, um, solicitation is michaelnation1957 at gmail.com or something like that. Okay, so you don't want to do that because people will believe that's the year you're born. So I would suggest, and there are many other reasons that I can go into it, create a unique professional email address for your career search so that when you are in this environment doing your lot of aggressive applications and stuff, and because you're going to start using AI, you'll be pumping out easily 8 applications a day. So it's one application per hour. That means you have a lot of things to track, a lot of information going out. You're going to have to remember what you sent out. So you're going to set up a filing cabinet in your professional email address. We call that a virtual filing cabinet that is going to be identified by folders. So for each folder that you create in this professional email address, that is going to identify a specific company that you're applying to. So whatever information you send out to these companies, you copy yourself back in the CC field of that email, and you put all that stuff that you're sending them into this folder in your professional email address so that you can track everything that you're communicating with these individuals. All right, and of course anything that they send to you that comes into your inbox or possibly into your spam folder, it goes into that folder that you created, which is your filing cabinet. And this becomes important because sometime down the road, after you've sent out hundreds of applications, perhaps in the first 2 weeks, you may have already sent out hundreds of applications using individual resumes and individual cover letters. You might get a call asking you to attend an interview the next day. You won't remember what you sent this individual, but what you can do is that you can ask them if you can call them back to schedule the interview. And after they hang up, you basically open up your professional email address. You go into that virtual filing cabinet that you created, the folders. You look at that company that called you, which is identified by folder name. You open that folder, you look at everything that you sent the company. So now you know what you sent them, so you're in sync. So when you call this company back to schedule the interview, you can tell them or remind them exactly that you know about the resume you sent them, the cover letter you sent them, about the job description, the job interview, and they'll be absolutely impressed because you're going to do this within 10 minutes because your um, professional email address is mobile. It's on your smartphone, and so is your filing cabinet too. It's part of that email address. So you can make reference to any documents that you email anyone within a split second. Okay, you just have to open it up and look for the data. And so it will impress the employer because you have responded very quickly and you're also advising them that you remember everything. So you come across as being highly organized and also very reactive, which is what employers want in today's job market. All right. So that's the professional email address that you should create. Now, I suggest that if you create that professional email address, that you use Gmail. Do not use Yahoo, AOL, Hotmail, or MSN.com or whatever you're using. Use Gmail because Gmail comes across as a email service provider that is built on data integrity, is very cautious about data security, and of course is with the technology because it is Google. Okay, so you come across as someone that is actually embracing technology, which is an important thing. That's a subconscious impression you're giving the people. Okay, now with the LinkedIn URL, LinkedIn is a professional social media platform that you can use to find job opportunities, and that's another workshop we talk about it. But you should create a LinkedIn profile. It's a free. You don't have to pay for this membership, but you are basically creating a LinkedIn profile that advertises all the information about you through your resume. So you're using that to market yourself and have people find you through social media. All right. So that's the structure of the contact information. So let's move forward and talk about the other stuff of the resume. So underneath the contact information is a job title. Now this is optional. You don't have to have a job title if you don't want to. Remember, these resumes are created and they're unique to the job description or the job opportunity. So you don't need a title to identify what the resume about. If you're using one resume to send to many job opportunities, that's why you would use a title to identify what the resume is, what job opportunity the resume is for. But this resume is unique for that job description, so you don't need a title. It's optional. But if you want to use the title because you have space and you're not running out of space within like a 2-page document, then the title of the resume is going to be the title of the job opportunity. So if you're applying for an office administration, the title is office administrator. If you're applying for an engineer, it's engineer. If you're applying for a truck driver, it's truck driver, etc. Okay, so underneath the contact information, followed by the title, is a section called a summary. Now, this happens to be the most important section or the area of the resume. This is the one of the two most important areas of the resume. This section here, which is called the summary statement, is a paragraph that is written typically with 5 to 7 sentences, and you're going to be using the keywords that you extract from the job description. And when you write this paragraph, it will identify why the employer should hire you and how you are qualified for that job. Okay? So when the employer is reading this resume and they're reading this paragraph, you are answering two of their questions. Why should I hire you? And how are you qualified for this job that I'm advertising? Because in this paragraph, you're reflecting all the things that you can do for the employer that the employer is asking for. all right? And what the employer is asking for is in their job description. And those are the key words that we extract or we identify to be used in this sentence, this structure, this paragraph structure, to convince the employer to invite you to the interview so you can sell yourself even more and convince them that you have lots of value to bring to the company. So this paragraph that you create, typically, it can be less than 5 sentences. It all matter. It all depends on how you want to write it, but typically it is between 5 and 7 sentences. Can be even more than 7, but it is one paragraph. All right, and this paragraph consists of the information such as your skills, your abilities, your accomplishments, as far as what the employer is asking for in their job description or the job opportunity or the job requirements. Okay, so this is a summary statement. It happens to be the most important section of the resume because if the human reads this as well as a software tool, but if the person reads this and they see that you have a lot of what they're asking for, it will help them to move forward into the resume and keep reading. Remember, today when employers receive a lot of resumes, if they're not using a software tool to extract the data to compare your resume against their job description to determine if the resume gets passed forward, if they're not using that tool, they're getting a lot of resumes that they have to read. So typically they scan the resume very fast. And so what you're doing by creating this paragraph that meets their requirements is that you're basically forcing them to stop scanning very quickly and start reading your content. So now they can basically say, oh, you're a great candidate. Let me get you to the interview. Let's go ahead and get you into the company so we can talk to you for potential employment. All right. So that's the reason why we do the summary statement. Okay. After the summary statement would come another section called the skills and accomplishments, but I just want to show you quickly an example of what the summary statement may look like. This is just a quick, simple example. This is a summary statement that was written based on a job description, and the job description could have been for a prep cook, and the employer was asking for a certain amount of information for any candidate that was going to apply. So the employer was asking for a prep cook with at least a year of experience that may have worked or should have worked in a fast-paced commercial kitchen, that must be very knowledgeable about cooking and preventing food waste, must have excellent knowledge of seafood dishes and different methods of cooking, and additionally that person should be a committed team player with great communication skills and able to remain calm under pressure. All right, so you as an example, you read that job description and you created this summary statement. So if I was the employer and I was asking all of that in my job description, and I now read this summary statement, which is the resume, I would then say, okay, great, I want to bring this person in. I haven't even got to the other section of the resume yet, but you've already made a good impression. And that's why we create the summary statement. So following the summary statement is a section called qualifications and skills. And it happens to be the second most important part of the resume. So there are two really important parts of the resume that will allow the employer to bring you into the interview. It is a summary statement that we just spoke about, and it is this section, the qualification and skills section. So what is in this section? Well, let's talk about the skills first. In the skills area of this section of the resume, we combine two types of skills, hard skills and soft skills. So hard skills are the skills that you formally learn through education or training or on-the-job training, okay, or on-the-job employment. So hard skills could be, as an example, data entry, using Microsoft Office, driving a forklift, cooking, preparing culinary dishes, truck driving, um, uh, nursing, things like that. Those are what we call hard skills, all right? Now, soft skills are different. Soft skills are the skills that you learn as you mature through your life, the skills that you would use or inherently have to get along with people and to get along with your co-workers in the company and to help the company or the department flourish and be highly productive. And soft skills could be things like verbal communication, written communication, multitasking, team player, um, perhaps organizational skills, and things like that. Okay. Now, when we read the job description from the employer could be asking for both hard skills and soft skills. So if we have those qualifications, we need to mirror what they're asking for in our resume. And so we put it into this section. All right. Typically, they are identified with bullets, as you see. So this section of the resume, which is called qualifications and skills, really has probably 2 years. It has or 3 years. It has a hard skill area, a soft skills area, and a qualification skills area. Now, how do we know what skills to put in here besides what the employer is asking for and what we can obviously do based on the job description? Well, we can go into Google and we can identify the position that we're applying for and ask it to identify the hard skills and ask it to identify the soft skills. So when you do that, you have this huge laundry list of skills, and you may be able to meet all of them, but you don't want to put everyone in the resume. That would actually make the resume look kind of silly. You want to put the skills that are pertinent or very necessary for the job that you're applying for. Okay? So if the employer is asking for specific skills and you match that, you put it in this section. But you can also put additional skills in just to convince them that you're you're pretty good, that you have lots of value. Okay? Now, additionally, there is another part of this section called the qualifications. And the qualifications are basically your achievements as it relates to your work experience and your work related skills or any qualities that you have that are pertinent to the job you're applying to. Okay? So here's an example. If I was the prep cook before, but now I went back to school and I became an admin assistant and I'm applying to an admin assistant job, I would not necessarily put my prep cook qualifications or my skills in the resume because I'm applying for an admin job. They don't go together, okay? So just be aware of that, that when you're listing your qualifications or your achievements in this section of the resume, and we'll show an example what it looks like, it is related to the job you're applying for. All right, so let's move forward and talk about the other section. After this section of the qualifications and skills, we now come into the employment history. So the employment history is identified in reverse chronological order. So your last job must be identified first, and then it flows down through your employment history to the first job that you had, or how many jobs you want to identify. Now, in this first bullet, it says list employment history in reverse order. Your most recent first include 10 to 15 years. You can include more than 10 to 15 years. It doesn't matter. Just whatever you include, make sure you don't include so far back in years that you identify that you're an older individual, because we do have the age discrimination issue. Okay, so I'm almost 70 years old, so I started working in 1980. If I was going to apply to a job, I would not identify in my resume that I started working in 1980, because obviously I would give away my age. Now, I might be one of the best things that the company could ever have hired, but because on my resume I identify my age, I might not get to that interview. So I might choose to reduce my employment history and go back to try and, put myself somewhere in like the 45-year bracket or something like that. All right. When I get to the interview, they will know that I'm older. I'm not lying because I didn't put everything on my resume. I just chose to not do that.
Quick question.
Yes, go
Are
ahead.
you quick question? Are you saying we should at least capture at least 10 years? Is that what I'm hearing? Though
No,
at
no,
least
not
10 years.
no, not at all. Um, it's really optional. It's up to you. You can. Is this Sharon?
It is.
Yes, Sharon. Thank you. Yeah, you can include whatever you want, Sharon. The only reason why you see on this first bullet it says include 10 to 15 years is mainly because of technology. In 2010 is when a lot of technology came into the workplace. A lot of technology was introduced to many, many companies. People started using Microsoft Office aggressively, using QuickBooks, using different software tools to make them more productive. And so employers are typically looking for candidates that have a lot of technology experience, right? So that is one of the reasons why they're saying 10 to 15 years back. You can include as much as you want, or you can include as little as you want. The intent of the resume gets you to the interview. And remember, in the employment section, you can also include unpaid employment. So when we talk about employment history, it is not only paid employment, it can be unpaid employment. For instance, you might be employed in a community service environment where you're not being paid, but you're volunteering your work. Or you may be actually caring for a family member who is ill, or you may be helping a friend to start their company, but you're not being paid. So all of these are activities that you do that can be included in your employment section if you want to show your strengths and abilities, and also to close the gaps if you have any gaps in your resume between different jobs. Yeah. So Sharon, it's really up to you. Some people create resumes that only show the last 5 years because they believe that that is the value that they're selling to the job opportunity. The most important thing is do not pick and choose what employment history that you want to identify in the resume if it creates gaps of employment. Employers get concerned when they see gaps in your employment history. They start thinking negatively about you. The first thing they're going to think about is um, perhaps illness, perhaps medical issues. And if you advertise that in your resume somehow, you might say medical leave of absence. That is going to prevent you probably from getting hired. Okay? So just be careful about that. All right, so you're going to highlight your experience related to the job that you're seeking. Um, and of course, you do that through your employment history, and you're going to identify under each job that you list. You're going to identify at a very high level your activities that you did at a very high level, probably in a sentence format. And then underneath that, and I'll show you this in an example in a minute, you're going to have bullets that identify what you achieved in that job position. Okay, so this is the employment history. And let's move on to the next section. We're almost through the resume structure. After the employment history comes your education. So you're going to list your highest level of education first. So if you did your high school, you went down and did your associates and possibly your bachelor's, then obviously your bachelor's is going to be listed first. And if you did your associates can come underneath it, and then can be your high school if you want. If you have advanced degrees like bachelor's or PhD or master's, you don't have to list your high school. But if you went to an Ivy League high school that you believe is very important to have in your resume, and you have the space to include it, by all means you can include it. Okay? So this is your education. Then after the education would be your certificates, license, and accreditation section if it relates to the job that you're applying to. So as I mentioned before, as an example, if we were a cook and I went back to school and got my um, administration degree, and I'm now applying to an office administration position, I would not necessarily identify a certification that I'm a prep cook. or a license that I'm a prep cook or things like that, because it has no bearing on the job I'm applying to. However, I'm not suggesting you don't have to do that. It's just that it may not be necessary. If you have the space and you can include it, by all means include it. But remember, yes, go ahead.
So, Mr. Michael, do you think it's best that we have multiple, like resume, like it depends on what kind of job we're searching for, whether it's customer service, the food industry, working at the office.
Yes, so when we started this presentation, I identified that you have to create the resume based on the job description. So you're having multiple resumes. You're not using the same resume to apply to multiple jobs. Each job that you apply to must have a unique version of that master resume. So you still have your master resume, which is a intact, well-written document, but you're creating versions for each job that you apply to. So absolutely, Ebony, we should do that. Yeah.
Okay.
Okay. And remember to turn off. I can do your camera for you. One sec. I'll turn it off for you.
Well, I don't know why I keep coming on this phone so raggedy trash.
That's okay. Don't worry. We got it. All right. So here, let me just close this down. Okay. Good. Okay. So underneath is your certifications, license, and accreditations, if you want. So one sec. Let me move forward. Okay. Underneath that now, if you have space, you can talk about your awards and recognitions, your volunteer experience, and your affiliations, memberships, etc. Remember, the information that we're putting in the resume is trying to get us to the job interview. All right, it's selling our credibility. So the document is not to be packed with a lot of stuff that is not necessarily important for that job opportunity, because if you put a lot of stuff in your resume that's not necessary for the job opportunity, it may not necessarily be received well by the reader, who is the professional hiring manager or the employer, etc. They're only looking for this resume to look at content, your skills, abilities, achievements, accomplishments, your employment history, your education and certifications, etc., as it relates to what they are asking for. So don't put everything in this document that you send to the employer, only for what they're asking for or as it's related to that job description. Okay, now I know that we're almost out of time, but we have a couple more slides to do. So what I'm going to suggest to everyone on this call, if you have a hard stop, remember you can leave at 11 because we started at 10, but I'm going to continue with the presentation and then make myself available to answer any questions. So if I see you drop off from the call, or the workshop, don't be worried. You're still going to get credit. But let me just remind everyone that after I finish presenting, you will receive email, 4 different emails, I would say by 12 o'clock. Okay? So it's really up to you. You can stay or you can leave. All right. So let me talk about AI, artificial intelligence, and why it is absolutely a requirement for us to be using this to create our resumes and everything going forward. Okay, artificial intelligence is a tool. It is just a tool. Highly, highly super intelligent, more intelligent than humans, based on the latest IQ test that it did. It has exceeded the human intelligence IQ level. All right. So remember, it is just a tool. It's just a software tool. Highly, highly intelligent that can do many, many things. It is typically the ones that are available to us, which are the 3 tools that are free to us, is ChatGPT, Copilot, or Gemini. Okay, those 3 tools are basically the same. It doesn't cost you anything to join. It's free, but you can use this tool to do your job search, to do your resume creation, and you use the tool to create your resume based on the job opportunity. You can use this tool, this AI tool, to do your job search, your resume creation, your cover letter creation, your interview question and answer guide creation, your interview thank you letter, any kind of documentation that you want to create, it can do it at a much higher and professional level than you can. Remember, everything matches the job opportunity. When we're applying to a job, it is the job opportunity that drives all the documentation that we create, including the interview question and answer guide. But the most brilliant feature of this tool is the ability for you to interact with it like a human to do your mock interview. So you interact with this tool in audio mode. You can type and interface with it through the keyboard, or you can speak to it and interface through audio. But it can do the mock interview with you to help you practice interviewing, and it does it flawlessly. It will understand any dialect. It will understand any language that you speak to it. So it is a very sophisticated tool, and I would encourage everyone to start aggressively using AI to create your resumes, your cover letters. Remember, the job description is going to drive all the documentation that you create to help it to create your interview question and answer guide for that job opportunity, to help you with your mock interview, to take you through the practice session. Remember, the tool is a mentor, it is a career coach, it is a teacher, it is a guide, it is an assistant. And in many cases, some people, including myself, use it as like a companion because it is so super intelligent. Okay. Now, of course, it doesn't replace humans, but it is available to us to reduce our stress level and our workload. So if I'm going to use AI to help me in my job search, it will save me 80%, close to 80 or 90% of all the work that I would have to do to apply to a job if I wasn't using AI. So if you're not using AI, typically if you're starting from scratch to apply to a job and do everything that you need to do to get ready for that potential opportunity and interview, you're looking at easily 4 to 5 hours. All right. So that means creating a new resume to match the job description, creating a cover letter, looking at the potential interview questions and answers, getting that document ready, getting yourself ready to for the potential interview. That is typically the fastest I've ever done, is about 4 to 5 hours. If I'm using AI, all of that can be done in half an hour. So you're saving yourself close to 80% of your workload, which means now you have more time for your family. Now you have more time to apply for more jobs. And that's the key, that you're using the tool so you can flood the market with a lot of professional resumes that is unique to the job opportunity. So we're not talking about blasting one resume out there. We're talking about having the tool create brilliant resumes for us and cover letters and everything else, so we can impress the employer, get to the interview, and execute well to get that job. And it doesn't mean that you have to use AI for high paying jobs. Everyone is now using AI for any job. So if you don't start using the tool now to help you to format your resumes and get and position yourself well for the employment opportunity, you're going to be behind everyone else, because everyone is now using AI, and employers understand and accept that you're using AI. However, you do well in the interview gets you the job. You can use the tool to get you to the interview. Just like you use Microsoft Office to create the document before. Remember, Microsoft Office is a form of advanced intelligence. It is a form of AI because it allows you to do many things through that computer software or that software application. AI is just a very super intelligent version of that. Yes, go ahead.
My question is, I don't really have a problem with my resume because my resume lands me the interview, but I think I need to more work on my interview to help get to the job, you know?
Right, so Ebony, this is the key of AI now. If you should use, just start playing with the tool if you haven't done that. Um, it can take you through the formal process of doing a mock interview, And so the way it would work is when you interact with the tool, you don't have to have an account with it, but I would suggest that you do. Remember, it's free. And the reason why you might want to sign up and have an account is because it will remember everything. And there's going to be, if you're going to do mock interviews with it, remember every time you open up AI, if you don't have an account, once you close down that application, it will forget everything that you've done with it. So you want to have an account so it remembers everything. But here's the beauty of using AI for mock interview. You open up the tool and you interface with it and you say, please help me um, with my interview skills and do a mock interview with me. And the tool will respond and says, please load your resume. So you copy and paste your resume into the dialog box. It will then say, thank you very much. Then it will say,
So it's a certain app that I have to download?
no, you don't have to download it. You can go directly to it, Ebony. What you do is in Google search, you can say Microsoft Copilot and immediately takes you into their website. So you're now in the app itself. You don't
Okay.
need, yeah, you don't have to download anything. And remember, it's free. You don't have to pay for it, but it's highly interactive. So play with it, Ebony. If you haven't, if this, I can talk to anyone else after this presentation because we're kind of running out of time now. About how AI can assist us, okay? Anyway, let's move forward with wrapping up this presentation. I just want to go through the actual other slides. So we just spoke about this here, which is AI can help us with the resume, all right? So we just spoke about that. Remember that when we're using AI to create our documents, that we stand behind the document. So the tool is not going to lie for you. It is going to do whatever you tell it to do, okay? So when we create the document using AI, there is no ethical issue because we are in charge of what it's creating for us, and we're the ones that are reviewing the document and validating. So here's a very simple, construct. You open up the tool, and you could say, please revise my resume using the following job description. So the AI tool will ask you, please paste your existing resume. Once you paste it, it will say thank you very much. Then it will say, please paste your job description. And then once it receives that, it will say thank you. And within seconds, it creates a brand new resume based on your resume, but it matches the job description. So the final product that you will actually see is a more sophisticated resume that takes the existing content of what you submit from your resume, matches it to what the employer is asking for, and creates a very good document that closely matches what the employer is asking for. Now, at that point, it's it's not final. You can then still interact with the tool and you could ask it a question. How can I improve my resume to get to the interview? And it will go through this interactive discussion with you, asking you about, well, do you have these additional skills that may not have been on your original resume, etc., etc., etc. Okay, so let me answer this chat here. One sec. Yes, that's correct, Lisa. So here's the thing. Um, if you look at AI and you look at their laws and bylaws, they are very, very um, uh, data conscious and security conscious, where they identify that nothing that you use on their site will ever be shared with anyone else. But you're absolutely right. We should never we should never include in whatever resume we upload to the site our personal information, which we can put our name there if we want, because that's typically how you're going to structure the account anyway. It's going to be under your email name. But if we want to include any other personal information that we normally do on our resume, such as our which, remember, the contact information and resume is your name, your city, state, and zip, your email address, your phone number, and possibly your LinkedIn URL. That's in the contact information. You don't have to include that when you upload your resume to the AI tool, so you can strip that out. Okay, what the resulting resume that it creates for you will have an open section that will identify where you should put your contact information. But it knows, it is a very sophisticated tool, so it already knows that you are not including your contact information. So that's a very good thing to talk about. Thank you so much, Lisa. Yeah, so the reason why Lisa mentioned that, and it's very important for all of us to understand that when we're dealing with technology today, because of all the data integrity issues and all the problems that we're having, we have to we have to be very careful about what we're sharing. And because AI is still under development by software programmers, while that data is secure, we don't know who has access to it. And so we just have to be careful. Okay, so let's move forward and talk about the advantages. We already spoke about AI advantages, so I'm not going to spend any time on this because we're almost out of time. Okay, now, when we spoke about earlier uploading our resume and having the software extract the data, that is what we call applicant tracking system. It's called ATS. It's just an AI-driven tool that extracts the information from our resume to compare it to the employer job opportunity. Okay, so ATS is a type of software that the employers will use on their computers to scan our resumes. But if we create our resumes now, we have to create the resume when we write it to make sure it will pass the scanning software. So there are certain things that we need to be aware of. If we're going to have AI create the resume for us from scratch, which it can do, it will be interacting with you, and you can tell it what you want, and it will create your entire brand new resume for you. It will create a resume that is ATS compatible, so we don't have to worry about that. But if we're creating a resume ourselves and not using AI, there are certain things that we have to be aware of that we should not do in a resume so it can pass the ATS scanner. So whenever we are creating our resume, do not put your contact information or any information in the header or the footer of the Microsoft Word document. Okay, that's number one. When you're creating your resume, you want to use fonts such as Arial, Calibri, Tahoma, Gourmand, Electiva, Georgia, Verdana, Times New Roman. Those are the fonts that the ATS scanner recognizes without a problem. All right? If you use a Nala font, it may have a difficulty extracting the data, but it's not going to reject your resume. It's just that perhaps it might not extract the data properly, okay, in terms of the sentence structure, things like that. Now, you must not use, when you're creating a resume, any kind of brush script fonts, such as Comic Sans or Lucidia handwriting, as we see on the slide. When you're creating your resume, you have a margin that runs around the document on the edges. Do not write anything inside that ½ inch margin. So you can open up that structure, that document that you're going to create in Microsoft Word with a ½ inch margin, top, bottom, left, and right. Okay, so you can maximize the space. Do not use any borders on your document, so don't put a border on the actual resume. The ATS scanner will reject the document if it sees that border, and that border could be like a flowery image, or it could be a box or something like that, or it could be lines. So do not include any graphics or logos in your resumes. No pictures, no photographs. It will reject your resume. Okay, we should not use any photographs on the resumes anyway when we send our resumes in, right? Because we could be discriminated against. So don't use any lines or symbols in the resume. It will reject the resume, okay? And don't include, if you're using Microsoft Word, don't include any tables or columns in the document. It can read a table, the ATS scanner, but it might not extract the data properly in the correct format. And of course, when we're creating our resume, only use round or bullets, black bullets, okay? So I'm quickly going to go through here, just to identify the different types of resume formats. We only have about 3 slides left. So in the past, when we were writing resumes, we would typically write the resume and use the chronological structure or the functional structure. But now the structure that we use, or the format, is a combination format. So I'm going to talk about these briefly, okay? Just going to show you a couple slides, and then we're going to talk about text as well. So this is a chronological information. So typically it was widely used in the past, right? It showed job advancement and people with steady employment. So this version, or this format was most used in the past when we were creating resumes. Today we're not using that anymore. We're going to use a combination. But let me show you what the chronological format looked like. So here's a chronological resume, right, format. So you have your contact information at the top, and then you have a title, food service worker, and then you have what we would call, say, summary of qualifications, then we have experience, and then we have education. So typically this was the format. Now this is just a sample. So this is not like, gospel or anything like that. It's just an example, okay? But this is the structure that you normally use. Now let's talk about the other one, which is called functional. Functional was like a skills resume, and typically people would use this format when they had um, when they had employment issues, or perhaps they had lots of skills but limited employment, or perhaps they worked at the same place for a long time and didn't have different employment history, but they had lots of skills. So what they would do is use a skills resume. And so this is just a sample. Again, just a, by no means is, like I said, is a gospel, but typically you'd have your contact information at the top, you'd identify the title, then you'd identify a little sentence there that talks about, who you are as far as a professional manager. Then you identify your core skills, and then now you identify career highlights. So in the career highlights section, that is a combination of all the things that you did for all the jobs that you're going to show in your job history. So if we move forward and look at the rest of the resume, this is the work experience or the employment history. Notice that they identify the jobs, the employers, but they don't identify what they did within that. So what they're doing here is that they're basically de-emphasizing who they work for and putting everything back in the career highlight section. Okay, we don't use this anymore. All right, this is a functional resume, and so this is what it looked like. What we use is a combination. So the combination is basically a combination of the two previous formats. It is used by everyone now going forward because it gives us the ability to add a lot of strengths and qualifications and skills into the resume if we follow that format. Okay, so what does it look like? Here's an example. So you have the contact information at the top, as I mentioned. You have a title. So this person is applying to a medical lab technician position. It starts now with the summary statement. So in this case, typically the summary statement would be between 5 and 7 sentences, but they chose only to put 2 sentences. That's fine. It is just a sample, right? After the summary statement, now comes the core strengths, followed by the highlight of the accomplishments, followed by procedure skills. So notice that in this slide, what you see here between the summary statement, the core strengths, accomplishments, and skills, this is the most important section of the entire resume that the employer is going to read based on what they're asking for. That would identify your ability to get to the interview. All right, now after this, follow it up with the employment experience. Notice that you have your position followed by the company that you work for, the start date and end date. So under each job, you have a very high level list or a high level indication of what you did. That's written in sentence format. Then after that, you have your bullets. These bullets are your achievements that you accomplished inside that job opportunity. Okay? And then obviously at the bottom, you have your education certification. Now notice here, they're not identifying their dates of education and certification, perhaps because they may have been an older individual and didn't want to give away when they graduated, because that would kind of identify their age. So in your education and certification area, you don't have to list when you graduated. You don't have to do the years if you don't want to, but you certainly need to identify your degree and the institution. In the employment section, you definitely have to identify your start date and your end date, okay? So that's just a sample. Now let's just quickly talk about the text. So what is the text resume? The text resume is just a version of the resume that you create. And we may be asked to upload a text version of our resume to certain employers because that's what they request. They don't want a Microsoft Word document. They don't want a PDF. They want a text version. Okay, so you create your resume and like you normally do, but when you're going to create a text version, you actually just say save as plain text. Okay, so basically you say save as plain text, and what does it look like? Here's an example of a document that was written in Microsoft Word. Looks kind of pretty, just one slide, and here is the text version. Okay, so you can see the text version is exactly the same as what the previous slide was, but it's very dry and it doesn't have any underscores or bold or things like that, and bullets are replaced by asterisks, right? Okay, and end of presentation now. So remember, your resume strikes a fine balance between applying to two types of readers, people and computers. So be very wary that when you create the resume, it is going to be scanned by software, all right, which every employer now has on their computer because you're sending them an electronic version, but it is also going to be read by the human, okay? The software doesn't necessarily, is not concerned with aesthetics or beauty of the document, but the human reader is. So you must still create the document that has a visual appeal so that when they read the document, they'll feel comfortable that you know how to create professional documents, okay? So that's that's the end of the presentation. Thank you all so much for attending. I'll be here for another 15 minutes if anyone wants to ask me questions.